What if I told you that the very reason they left is the only reason they'll ever come back, but only if you do the one thing you've been too afraid to do? Most people never figure this out. They get stuck in a cycle of overthinking, texting, apologizing, chasing closure from someone who's already moved on emotionally, or at least pretending they have. You're not just heartbroken, you're confused. You're stuck between should I fight for this, and why wasn't I enough? But here's the truth almost no one is telling you. Avoidants don't come back out of love, they come back out of impact. And right now you're not making one, you're too busy proving, justifying, hoping. And in that energy you're forgettable, replaceable, easy to ignore. But the second you shift, the moment you take back your power and become someone they can't predict, can't access, can't control, that's the moment they start to feel your absence like pain. This video isn't about playing games. It's about flipping the script on everything you were taught about love, worth, and attachment. I'm going to show you exactly how to become unforgettable, not by trying harder, but by finally letting go in the way that actually makes them look back. If you've ever been left on read, ghosted, breadcrumbed, or made to feel like your love was too much, this is the conversation you were never given but desperately needed. So don't just listen, stay with me till the end, because once you understand this, you'll never chase someone who avoids you again. And they'll never forget the day you disappeared without a word. You need to understand something that most people never figure out, even after years of heartbreak. Avoidants don't chase what's in front of them, they only start missing what disappears. That's not some cute quote for Instagram. That's a hard psychological reality. Avoidantly attached people are wired to fear closeness, not because they're bad people, not because they didn't care, but because intimacy feels like a threat to their independence, to their sense of control. So the second they start to feel seen, known, or emotionally vulnerable, their defense system kicks in. They distance, they detach, they disappear. Now here's what most people do wrong. When the avoidant pulls away, you panic. You reach out, you explain, you give more. You try to remind them of the connection. But in doing so, you play straight into their wiring. You become predictable, available, and easily dismissible. The brain of an avoidant doesn't register closeness as safety. It registers it as pressure, but absence, silence, that's different. That activates something else entirely, uncertainty. And in the human brain, uncertainty breeds curiosity. It triggers a sense of loss, and loss, even for an avoidant, can feel like danger. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should play games. This isn't about manipulation. This is about understanding how emotional distance affects human perception. When you remove your energy, your attention, your availability, you disrupt the pattern. You stop feeding their illusion of control. You make them sit with the consequences of distance. And that moment, that unfamiliar silence, is where the avoidant begins to feel something they haven't felt in a long time, the weight of disconnection. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Avoidants rarely remember who stays, they remember who leaves. Not because they don't value the ones who gave everything, but because it's easy to take for granted what's always there. It's when you vanish that they start to realize, wait, I don't have access to that love anymore. That access point is gone. That soft landing spot they thought would always be there, it's no longer within reach. And that's the moment, if it's ever going to happen, that they start the process of self-reflection. But none of that happens if you keep showing up when they don't. You think you're proving your love, but all you're doing is confirming their decision to leave. They don't miss who's waiting. They miss who walked away and never looked back. So if you're still wondering whether to send that next text, maybe ask yourself instead, who do I become when I stop giving love to someone who runs from it? That's where your power begins, and that's when they finally notice. Not when you speak louder, but when you say nothing at all. Let's talk about something that's rarely understood in relationships, especially by those who give the most, love the deepest, and hope the longest. Proximity makes you forgettable. Distance makes you valuable. It sounds harsh, I know, especially if you're the kind of person who shows up consistently. If you're the one who texts first, who forgives fast, who stays just a little longer, even when your needs are being overlooked. But here's the truth you need to confront. When your presence becomes expected, when it becomes routine, it loses its emotional weight. Humans don't cherish what's constant. We don't feel the value of something that's always there, and in attachment psychology, this plays out more than anywhere else. See, when you're constantly available to someone who takes space as safety, you don't come across as loving, you come across as predictable. You become a background noise in their life, a steady hum they've trained themselves to tune out. You might think that consistency will win them over, that it will calm their fears and teach them how to love. But here's the paradox: they don't learn to value you by seeing you always there. They learn to value you when they realize they can't find you anymore. It's distance, emotional, physical, energetic, that creates reflection, not closeness. Closeness, for an avoidant, often equals pressure. But distance, that's where intrigue begins. When someone loses your presence, truly loses it, they're forced to confront what that presence meant in the first place. And for the first time, you're not just a habit. You're not just that nice person who stuck around longer than you should have. You're now the one who got away, not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself more. And you might be thinking, but if I pull away, what if they forget me completely? Here's the deeper truth. If they can forget you that easily, they never truly saw you in the first place. And you deserve more than being someone's temporary emotional buffer. You deserve to be irreplaceable, but people don't treat you as irreplaceable until they realize you're no longer on standby. This is the shift. You stop trying to be memorable by being present, and you start becoming unforgettable by being absent in the right moments. That's not game playing, that's dignity, that's emotional self-respect. And ironically, that's when their mind starts racing. That's when they wonder where you went. That's when they realize your presence wasn't just convenience, it was connection. It was depth, it was rare, and by the time they understand it, you're already becoming someone new. Someone who doesn't need to convince anyone to stay. So remember this, your constant availability doesn't make you safe, it makes you invisible. But your distance, that's where your identity sharpens, that's where your value is remembered. And that's when they start to feel your absence like gravity. Here's where most people get stuck, and it's the part no one really wants to hear. You don't get your power back by waiting. You get it back by walking. See, deep down, most of us don't want closure. We want permission. We want the person who hurt us to suddenly wake up, text us, call us, say the magic words, "I made a mistake." We hang around, emotionally and energetically, hoping they'll change, hoping they'll choose us, hoping they'll finally see what we've been worth this whole time. But let me ask you something directly. How long are you going to keep waiting for someone who made it clear they weren't ready to stay? That's not love, that's self-abandonment. And the longer you stay emotionally available to someone who's emotionally absent, the more disconnected you become from your own sense of worth. People think walking away is about punishing someone. It's not. It's about choosing yourself in a room where no one else is. It's about realizing that your peace is more valuable than their potential, because potential doesn't love you. Potential doesn't call. Potential doesn't show up when it matters. Here's the psychological truth. We teach people how to treat us not just by what we say, but by what we tolerate. If you keep showing up after they disappear, you're teaching them that they don't need to be consistent. If you stay emotionally hooked while they stay emotionally distant, you're reinforcing the very dynamic that's breaking your heart. Avoidants don't respect loyalty. They respect standards, And standards aren't about being cold or closed off. They're about being self-aware enough to say, I'm not going to betray myself just to keep you comfortable. You want to be unforgettable. Stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. Choose silence over explanation. Choose dignity over desperation. Choose walking away not as a tactic, but as a truth. Because here's what happens when you stop waiting. You stop orbiting someone who isn't grounded enough to receive your love. You stop sending energy into a black hole that can't return it. And slowly, quietly, you return to yourself. And here's the irony: when you do that, the whole energy shifts, the dynamic breaks. You're no longer the person begging to be seen. You become the person they start wondering about. But by the time they try to circle back, you've changed orbit entirely. Because power doesn't come from being wanted. Power comes from no longer needing to be. So if you've been asking yourself, should I reach out one more time? Try asking instead, what happens if I never reach again? That answer, that's where your freedom starts. And for the first time, so does your healing.